Okay, so today we are talking about the 5 main reasons why people move to Raleigh. My name is Claire Gens. I'm a real estate agent here, and I would say about 60% of the clients I work with relocate here. And so we're going to cover the top 5 reasons why majority of clients are moving to this area. So if you're thinking of moving to Raleigh, one of these reasons will probably resonate with you, and if not, I will definitely be curious to hear what is prompting you to consider a move here. So the first thing that I wanted to point out is the seasons here, or that fact that we still have seasons, but we do not have the harsh climates that majority of regions have. We have a lot of clients that move here from the Northeast, for example. So think we have Massachusetts, we have New York, we have New Jersey, and then alternatively, there's also a lot of clients coming from places like Florida and Texas. So reason being is here in North Carolina, you still have seasonality. So you're still having the spring, summer, fall, and winter, but the seasons as a whole and the climate is much more mild. And so while you're still getting those true seasons that you can appreciate, you're not feeling like you're in temperatures that are extremely cold or extremely hot. The caveat to this, I will say, is some people coming from other climates can feel like the humidity here is pretty bad. And I will say right now in July and then going into August, humidity is really not great here. It's a little bit painful. However, the other 10 months out of the year, you still get the seasons, but the weather overall is fairly mild. The other thing I will say about the seasons is whenever people move here, they often ask about, okay, do I need insurance as far as hail, wind, rain, especially if they're coming from a climate like Florida. And then alternatively, if you're coming from a place up north, there's often questions about how much snow we get. So to answer the first part, from those who are coming from a place like Florida, you do not need hurricane or flood insurance. We're about 2 hours from the coast, but we are not impacted by those weather patterns, so no need for that. And then as far as snow goes, we get snow, I would say about twice every season. And usually it might be a couple inches here or there and the entire city will shut down, but otherwise nothing major. So to recap, seasonality and the milder seasons is definitely one of the reasons why I see people moving here. Okay, reason number 2 people are moving here is affordable cost of living. Now, I think for a lot of people who are native to Raleigh and the surrounding area, people feel now prices have gotten extraordinarily high, but I will say as a whole, the average price point here in Raleigh is $430,000 at the time we are making this video. So that being said, it's still much more affordable than a lot of the larger metro areas. And what I like to think is not only is the purchase price of what you can get for a home more affordable, but you also have to think taxes and insurance are a lot less here. I have clients right now that I'm working with who are coming from New Jersey, and they are shocked how low property taxes are here. So when you think about that, you inevitably can then typically afford a nicer home. You're not paying as much in property taxes. The other thing, kind of like we mentioned on the weather portion, is because majority of homes do not need flood insurance because they're not going to be in a floodplain, and you don't have to worry about additional insurance like wind, hail. You're not paying an exorbitant amount of insurance either. So again, that cuts down on the housing cost itself. The other thing I would say, in addition to the cost of the home and your associated taxes and insurance, also, just the overall of living expenses here tend to be lower. So if you think car insurance, we tend to have lower premiums. Again, the weather here, going back to that, since it's much more mild, that extends to car insurance, house insurance. So you're paying a lower premium on that front. And then realistically, I would say, and I've traveled to a good amount of cities, I feel like the restaurants here, groceries, I personally feel like a lot of those places are going to be on par with more medium-sized metros. Of course, we're not going to be as expensive as larger metros like New York or LA, but I also feel like don't expect to come here and be able to get a glass of wine for $10 or $12. Some places do have that. But all that to say, overall, the cost of living here ends up being much more affordable and people can get a lot more for their money, which is reason number 2 why people are moving here. Okay, reason number 3 people are moving here. If you are not familiar with what is referred to as the triangle, let me give you a quick breakdown because this has to do how jobs are laid out. So here we have Raleigh and what is known as the Triangle. It includes Raleigh, Durham, and Chapel Hill. So all of these three cities are what make up the Triangle. So if you hear this area referred to as the Triangle, those are the three cities and areas it's referring to. So the thing here is we have a lot of major universities, healthcare systems, and now tech. So Raleigh was actually labeled as the East Coast Silicon Valley for the amount of tech that's coming here. And so if you can imagine, tech is coming here, and then also we have a long-standing history of world-class healthcare and universities. And so what happens is, I know tech jobs have been a little rocky at some points, but when you combine the emerging tech here along with long-standing jobs and security with healthcare and universities. And so when that happens, you are tending to attract jobs that are more recession-proof and are going to be more steady and consistent. And so that allows for a long-standing pipeline. So whenever you have these industries that are propping up or helping prop up this economy, it allows for the area and the economy itself to be much more stable and steadfast, which is definitely not only appealing for people moving here, but also a likely incentive if you're moving here and your job falls into one of those three categories. So number 4, why people are moving to Raleigh and the Triangle. So this one has to do with just having things to do here. So I will be the first to say I have lived in Raleigh and the general area for the last 10 years or so. And in 2022, I left Raleigh and moved to Denver for 1 year because I felt like Raleigh was not at a place yet where there was enough to do. For me personally, I didn't feel like it was a big enough city. Well, I left to move to Denver for a year, and during that year, Raleigh, all of a sudden, had so much more infrastructure built up. We had more parks, more restaurants, more shopping. All of a sudden, I was like, wait, this is actually a city that I want to be in. So all that to say, the thing that I personally feel like is really nice about Raleigh and that I see a lot of clients moving here for is you still have a more medium-sized city where you don't have nearly as many issues with traffic and crime, things of that nature. However, on the flip side, you still have enough to do and there's enough activities, whether it's boutique fitness studios, parks, shopping, dining, where you still feel like, okay, there's ample activities and things I can choose from. And it's not just like some sleepy midtown or mid-sized city for that matter. So I feel like it really is the perfect balance of not too big, so you don't have to deal with the issues that larger cities tend to have, but there's still so much to do here. Okay, last but not least, reason number 5 why people are moving here is the amount of green space. So one of the things you will notice if you have never been to Raleigh before, whenever you land and you're coming in through the airport, you will notice how much green there is. And I think it's something that if you've lived here your whole life or your majority of your life, you don't necessarily notice it until you go somewhere else and you see the lack of green. And so I think whenever people come here, they really enjoy literally the amount of green, but also people who enjoy spending time outdoors. There's so many parks, trails, and so the fact that you're able to actually spend time outside the majority of the year because our weather is milder, that's a huge plus. But on top of that, there's so many parks and green spaces that can be taken advantage of. So to recap, we have the actual seasons, we have lower cost or affordable cost of living, a steady job market, enough things to do, and green spaces. I would be curious to hear if any of you guys are thinking of moving here or if you've already moved here, what drew you to Raleigh. But these are the top 5 things that I would say most of my clients relocating here are looking for and why they choose Raleigh.